Hello my creative friends, it's time to take another art break, and today we're going to be working on this whimsical style frog. Have you ever looked at a whimsical style painting and thought, oh, I could never draw it? But you know what? Sometimes it's just breaking down the simple shapes and then you can figure out how to draw it yourself. I'm going to walk you through some steps of how you could possibly draw this cute style frog. But for those of you who'd like to draw and paint along with me, but drawing's really not your thing, I do have a sketchbook membership. That's where I have all of the line drawings for any of the paintings I do on my channel. You can just simply go ahead and scan that QR code. It'll take you right over to my Ko-fi shop. That's where I have my membership. It's very reasonably priced, and I so appreciate all those who support my channel that way. Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. First, I'm going to walk you through just some simple sketch steps, and then I'm going to walk you through the watercolor steps of adding all the beautiful little color washes to this little painting. And then at the end, I'm going to share with you a great tool, paint medium, that you can use with watercolor, and it's called gouache. This is kind of a little secret tool. So often when we do watercolor, we don't feel like we get a lot of grace with changing things, but you can do a few things by using some gouache, and I'm going to show you how I added some little details using just that. Well, let's get started, and we'll start the beginning steps of drawing this cute little frog. The first shape I'm going to be using is for the head, and that's a marshmallow shape. It's that squishy kind of rounded off square shape. For the body, I'm going to be arching out on each side. That'll be the top part of her dress. I'm going to curve it and make a smile face waistband, come out a little bit more, and then do a wavy bottom for her skirt. Now I'm going to go back up to the head and do half circles on the top. That's going to be how the curvature of the head goes. I'm going to erase that line there and then add 2 large circles in each side of that area. That's where I'm going to be building my eyes. Once I have the eye circles done, I'm going to color in the left side of my eye. It doesn't really matter which side you do, you just want to do it on both of the same sides. So I'm choosing the left, so each side of the eye will have a dark circle on the left. Now for the nose, I'm just adding a tiny little kidney bean shape and then just creating this little drop down sweet smile. For the arms, I wanted to keep it very simple. I'm going to start at the shoulder line, go out, and then come into the middle because she's going to be holding something. And then I'm just doing a wiggle back and forth type of hand. It kind of looks like E.T. if you think of E.T. fingers. Nothing too fancy. They just got long, skinny, wiggled fingers. And then for the feet, I'm doing basically the same thing, coming out, going back in, and creating those little feet shape. She's sitting down, so this works perfect. Her little feet are right underneath her skirt. I'm going to give her a crown on the top of her head, and I also give this little gal some sweet eyelashes. And that's a simple way to draw a frog. For this painting, I'm going to be using one of my student grade papers, the Canson XL paper. That's what I'm going to be using for my paper. And I'm going to be using the Paul Rubin watercolor set. Use whatever you have. And then this is the set of gouaches I have. It's an inexpensive set that I purchased off Amazon, but it's a great one to use. It's got a variety of colors and it's very reasonably priced. If you are a part of my sketchbook membership, I will give you a color swatch of the colors that I used for my painting as an inspiration to develop yours if you would like to have some sort of color guide. It's always a great idea to swatch your colors first because with watercolor, it's harder to change your colors once you start. So it's a great idea to kind of have an idea of the color direction you want to go before you begin your watercolor painting. Now with watercolor, you're always painting the shadows, so you're going to start with your lightest colors, and that means those layers are going to have, the beginning layers will have more water in it usually. I usually mix my colors to about tea consistency, no thicker than what a coffee consistency would be. That's going to keep my paint a little translucent. It's going to allow me to layer my colors and still see them underneath as I'm laying and building that look. And that's what watercolor is really kind of all about, is being able to see those translucent colors. Here I'm just mixing up my colors in my palette, so I'm beginning with a little bit of greens, some aquas. I know I'm going to be using those, so I'm just mixing them off to the side. Another trick too is that I don't feel like I have to always have the same paint, like it needs to look exactly the same. So I'm often dipping back and forth into my different colors. That way everything is kind of blended. It's uniformed, it's cohesive because I'm using those colors throughout my paint. So this is just how I normally begin. I mix up a variety and then I begin the painting process. For this particular painting, I decided I would begin on the frog. Now my paper is completely dry. I'm going in just adding my watercolor inside of the frog. The unique property about watercolor, it wants to flow wherever your paper is wet. So as long as your paper is not wet outside of the frog, that color will stay directly where you put it. So that's kind of the nice technique of doing a wet paint on a dry surface. It's going to stay exactly where you want to put it at this particular point. I'm going to kind of be adding the layers there, and then I'm going to choose a darker shade, and I'm going to tap that darker shade on the edges of my cheeks and at the tops of my arms, or perhaps any place else I want to add a shadow into that layer, because that would then become a wet on wet look. My paint underneath is wet, and when I tap that next layer of paint on the top, because it is also wet, my colors will mix and blend, and it does what I like to call watercolor magic. It's going to blend on its own. You don't have a lot of control. You can just put the colors on and let them flow naturally into itself, but it does create some really pretty watercolor looks. The next area I'm going to work on is I'm going to be choosing to pop up and work on some of the flowers. The reason why I'm going to choose an area to paint in that doesn't touch my frog is because if I touch my frog at this stage, my paper is still wet there, so any color I put next to it that might be a different color, that's going to flow right into my frog because my frog area is wet. I'm adding another wet element on. I don't want it to be next to there and blend my colors together if I don't want them to mix, and I definitely don't want the orange from my flowers to mix into my green frog, so I'm going up a little higher and working on those areas. I'm doing the same technique. I'm adding a little bit more of an orange color, and now I'm going in with just a darker red, choosing one side of my flower to tap that in there. And then that color is going to work the same way as it did on that frog face. It's going to blend naturally. Now my colors down below have had a little bit of time to dry. This is a student grade paper, so it does dry a lot faster. If you're using 100% cotton paper, you might have a little bit more open time. You might have to allow your things to dry a little bit more before you were to work next to a color area that you didn't want it to mix together. Now you can see I've just picked up a variety of greens. I keep on mixing. I pick up a little bit more of a different shade of green, maybe a little bit of rust, and I can blend those together. I'm still keeping more to the tea, to the coffee consistency. I'm still on that layer of coloration, so I don't want to go too dark too quick. I want to build my colors as I go. When you're working on this lower area here for the greens, the trick to that is just have a variety. So some might be more blue, some may have more earthy tones to it. You just want a variety, so when you mix it up, you can see a difference. Now this is just the beginning layers with watercolor. I usually add at least 2, 3, possibly even 4 layers of color. It just depends on how it dries. With watercolor, it mostly always dries lighter. So what you're seeing now when it's wet won't look that way when it dries. Another thing to keep in mind with watercolor, it's great to allow your paint to naturally dry. That way your pigments are going to go down inside of your paper and you're going to get more of a true color of what you're painting. If we dry them too quickly, if we force dry it, the color sits more on top. But if you allow your paint to dry naturally, that color and those pigments are going to sink down into your paper. So it's best if you can give your paint a little bit of time to dry and then work your layers as you go. As we move along, I'm using very much similar steps on all of the areas. I first lay my lightest colors on, and then I come back in after they've dried a while and add the next layers. I'm not going to show you all the steps. It normally takes me about an hour to paint these paintings, these small ones. This is I believe it's a 5x7 painting. It usually takes about an hour to do all the watercolor steps. It was super hot in my studio. We've been having very exceptionally warm days here. So my paint was drying pretty quickly, but even that being said, it still takes about an hour to paint one of these little paintings. But I'm going to move right along and you'll see me do very similar steps. I'll pop back in and give you some more information as I go. For this mushroom, I decided to keep my colors fairly neutral. She's holding a little colorful mushroom that's going to have a brighter cap on it, so I thought the big mushroom I could just leave very neutral. I'm mixing a variety of raw umber, burnt sienna. I'll be adding just a tiny bit of gouache in the end, adding some white highlights using some gouache. There's a couple ways that you can leave bright white into your paintings. You can either choose to actually leave the paper showing, which would probably be your brightest white, or you can add add a little bit of masking fluid, which would totally block out that area. It's almost like a rubber cement that doesn't dry all the way, and you can mask out an area which wouldn't allow any color that you could paint right over it, but none of the paint would go underneath it. I have not used masking fluid very much. Normally, I just negative paint around some things. Or another way that you can add some white back into your areas is to actually use a white gouache, or we have been using some of the dark Martin, that's hard for me to say, Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed proof white. The difference between a bleed proof white and a white gouache is that the bleed proof white, the watercolor does not come up to the top at all. Sometimes with your gouache or even in your inks, those things, the underneath watercolor can come up to the top. And then instead of being a white gouache, if you have it right underneath there, it could become a pink looking gouache. So it kind of depends on the look that you want in the end. If you want it to be a true white, you'll need to either mask it off so you don't get any paint underneath there, or add a bleed proof white on the top. I'm just going to be doing some negative painting, and adding some gouache on the top is what I'm going to be doing in these areas. Now I'm adding the color to my eyes here. I started with a bright green. You're going to notice I have just a little bit more almost like watery paint in there. I'm looking actually to kind of create more of a bloomed look. That blooms happen where you get irregular edges on them when you have a little bit more water in it. Definitely practice it off to the side first, like on a different piece of paper. Try it. Add a little puddle of color, and then tap in a darker color and see how your colors react and your pigments react, and see what kind of blooming you can get with your paper and your colors you're using. I wanted that very irregular look outside of the eyes, and that was one way I could create it. Now I'm moving right in. I'm continuing on with those same steps of going light and then adding my layers. I'm still mixing to about no thicker than coffee consistency. I add my layers and build them as I go. That way I'm going to keep that translucent look. It's very much a glazing layer. So you're building on one top of the color on top of the other. And if you do that, that's going to give you those very subtle pretty watercolor blends, and that's what we all love about watercolor, is seeing those translucent layers. These orange flowers I'm working on were so fun to create. I love creating this style where you can pop in this very bright orange color, and then you can lift some of the color too by giving your brush a simple little squeeze, taking out some of the color, and then lifting some highlights in, and then go back in with a red color. And I'm just going to tap that right at the base, and because my flower is still wet, that color will move up, so you'll have a dark concentration of the red, and then it'll move up into your orange, and it is so pretty. It's a super fun way to create these little simple whimsical flowers. The flowers at the bottom are done very much the same way. I start with a light shade of turquoise and then tap in a more concentrated form of turquoise on the left-hand side and let that color just travel across and create that real pretty watercolor blend. Another thing I like to keep in mind when I'm creating these illustrations is I like to move my colors around my painting. Because those bottom flowers are already painted in that turquoise color, I thought it would be great to add just a touch of that turquoise at the top, and the dragonflies seem to be a perfect spot to add it. It took me a bit to figure out what color combination I wanted to use on the little gal's dress, and I decided to use a buttercream background and then more of like a denim blue accent for the ruffles and for the stripes on her dress. I'm going to be adding some gouache to this area, some light white striping. That's a real nice subtle stripe that you can create with the gouaches. I'm still continuing to let my paint dry in between layers and then adding a little bit more color as I need to go. Again, it's a great idea. Let your paper dry and then see how your colors are actually showing up. And then you can also take a black and white photo of your work, and that's going to allow you to see where your darks are, your mediums, and your lights. And often that's a great amount of information to see if you need to have more balance in your painting. Is everything getting too dark, or is it really too light and you need to add some more contrast? So go ahead, stop, take a picture, a black and white picture of your painting, and get a gauge of where you're at with the layering of your colors. I let my blues dry fairly well for her dress, and then now I'm coming in with this buttery cream color of yellow, and I'm going to be putting that on the top part of the dress and in the shapes of the little stripes down below. And when that paint is still wet, I'm going to be picking up a little bit darker kind of yellow ochre color, and I'm going to be tapping that on one side of the stripe and underneath the arms, or like next to the arms, to create any areas that might be a natural shadow area. And by having one area that has a darker shadow and the other side having a lighter highlight, anytime you do that in your spaces or on your fabric area, it's just going to give it more dimension, and it's going to feel like that skirt has some movement in it and not just being a complete flat one color. So by having a shadow side and creating a highlight inside of the stripes, it's just going to give it so much more dimension if you take the time and do those little tiny steps. I've let my painting dry completely, and now I'm going to start working on that background. When you're choosing colors for your background, sometimes it can be a little nerve-wracking because you've got this much time involved and you have to decide what you want to do on the background, if you want to leave it just plain white or add a color. In this instance, I decided I wanted just more of a softed, blended look. So I was going to choose a color that would be something that I'd already used, and I decided to use the soft yellow. It's just a nice little muted color that could work in the background. It would blend with the rest of like the oranges and the greens and the blues. It would all work together. So I didn't have to worry about it fighting what I already had there. I just wanted a real soft background. So I water it down fairly much, like more of like a coffee consistency, and then just brush it on. Now I do give it just a little chance to dry here and there, and I'm going to be picking up some of that turquoise color, that or darker blue color there, just a tiny bit, and I'm going to be adding that to some areas down below. Now I know there's a slight risk that this is going to end up looking a little green because the blue and the yellow mixed together are going to be more, it's going to turn into a slightly different shade of green, but I know the greens will match too. It's just going to act like more of a foliage look to it, but I thought I wanted more color than just the yellow, so I watered it down a lot, and I'm just tapping it here and there. Go slow in this step if you decide to add it. You could even let your paper dry all the way before you added the blue layer on if you wanted to keep it more turquoise and a little less green. So it always can be sometimes a little bit of a nerve-wracking point adding the backgrounds, but I knew I didn't have a lot of it to show, and I wanted it to just be nice and soft and subtle. And of course, here's the magic time, is removing the tape. Ta-da! It always looks so good when you take the tape off. And now we're going to move on to one of my favorite steps, adding all the scribbly bits. Here comes the colored pencils, the pens, and a little bit of gouache. I'm going to be using some gouache to be able to add some colors in at this stage of the painting that I couldn't really be able to add in those small little detail areas using my watercolor anymore. So I'm going to be using some white, and I'm tapping in some white dots, and then I'm going to be mixing my color on my little tiny paintbrush, a little bit of that golden yellow color and my white mixed together, and I'm going to be tapping it on those little stamens just to bring them to life and going to see more exact color. I can't do that with my watercolor at this stage, so gouache works really well to be able to do that type of technique. I'm also going to be using the gouache to create some white striping in her dress. I'm going to thin it down, twist my brush, make it to a nice point, and add a few little stripes in those areas. I'm also going to be using it, watering it down just even a little bit more, and creating a lace detail at the top. It's just watered down and it's just floating across there. I'll come back in with a stronger bit of the white and add just a little dot to give it even more of a lace look. So it's a great way to add some details in at this stage of your painting. It gives you a different look than what ink would, or even color pencil. It can give you a slight wash look or even more intense opaque look by using gouache. This is a water-soluble gouache that I'm using. There's also acrylic gouaches that won't move. So there's a bunch of different things that you can use, but I thought it would be fun to show you how you can add some little details using this fun painting medium called gouache. Of course, I'm going to be adding some colored pencils. I love using colored pencils with watercolor. It just adds another line quality, some more textures that you just can't get with watercolor alone. And I love using colored pencil to do that. If you have a smoother watercolor paper, though, the colored pencils look great on it. The more bumpier the surface, I don't necessarily care for that look, but I do like it on a smoother watercolor paper. To add some real subtle bits of white to the eyes, I'm going to be using the Jelly Roll 08 Sequoia pen to be able to add those lines. I have a love-hate relationship with this pen. Sometimes it works really well, and other times I feel like I struggle with it. But today it worked really well, and it gave me just a nice subtle bit of white for my eyes and added just a perfect little highlights in there. And I love the size of the tip, of the metal tip on this pen. It's one of my favorites to use. I'm also going to be using my Micron pens. I was using a couple different ones in a variety of nib size, anywhere from 03 to 001, some small ones. I was using the sepia tone as well as the black to add a variety. I wanted to add a variety by using the tips of different sizes of the tips as well as the color. And here you can actually see me use a pencil. So you can add a lot of different elements by just adding even just a simple little pencil mark. It's going to show different than what a marker will. And you can see all the lovely detail you can get by using some colored pencils, some Micron pens, and even your pencil. I'm going to have this little character for sale on my Ko-fi shop. I've been creating a download digital series of some characters that I've created. They have different shapes that you can have, and you can use them in like home decor pieces, print out for cards, a whole different types of things that you can use them for. So definitely check out my Ko-fi shop if you might be interested in having a digital copy of this cute little froggy gal. Well, let's take a look at what she looks like sitting in my studio amongst some of the other fairy tale story type of characters we've created so far on my channel this summer. Well, hopefully you found this whole process really enjoyable. First starting by tracing or drawing, then adding the wonderful watercolor, and then finishing the piece with so many delightful little scribble bits and extra little textures to bring it to life. If you enjoy doing whimsical style art or crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Every week I put up new tutorials, so there's always something fun here to create. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. It really does help YouTube push my videos out there. Well, thank you for joining me, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again, and perhaps next time you'll paint right along with me.